You know, there's something profoundly unsettling about the world we live in today. It's loud, screaming, in fact. Everyone's got something to say. Opinions are tossed around like candy at a parade. And people are starving for attention, addicted to outrage and drowning. And in the midst of all this noise, we lose something. We lose ourselves. All right, when you draw back from that endless chatter and turn your gaze inward, something remarkable starts to happen. Everything begins to fall into place, not all at once and not without effort, but with precision, quiet, incremental, deep. You see, people often ask me, Dr. Peterson, how do I fix the world? And I tell them, start with your room. Start with yourself, because the world isn't some abstract entity floating out there. It's made up of people, and you're one of them. If you're broken, the world is a little more broken. But if you put yourself in order, the world becomes a little more orderly too. I remember when I was younger, confused, angry, lost. I had ideas, but they weren't cohesive. I thought the world owed me something. But slowly I began to realize that the chaos around me was, in many ways, a reflection of the chaos within. Sparing your from sever or ver writing. So I started small, cleaning, reading, writing, thinking, being silent. I stopped pretending I had all the answers and began listening. Not just to others, but to the quiet voice of conscience. That voice, doesn't scream, it whispers. And if you never shut up, you never hear it. Silence is not submission, it's strength under control. There's immense power in saying, I don't need to react. I don't need to prove myself. I need to grow. That's the kind of silence that builds character. Not passivity, but poise. The kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, but holds firm. When you start focusing on yourself, not in the narcissistic, self-absorbed sense, but truly focusing, you begin to see all the places where you're not living up to your potential. It's humiliating, it's painful. You realize how much time you've wasted, how many opportunities you've let pass because you were too distracted, too afraid. But that realization, if you don't let it destroy you, can rebuild you stronger, sharper, humble. And here's the thing, suffering is coming for you, whether you like it or not. Illness, betrayal, loss, they're written into the structure of existence. You don't get to opt out, but you do get to choose how you'll face it. Will you meet it with disarray and resentment, or with order and purpose? Oh, you want to change the world? Good. So do I. But don't start by shouting at it. Don't start by tearing it down. Start by standing up straight, by telling the truth, by watching what you say. By doing what you say you'll do. That's where real transformation begins. Not with a megaphone, but with a mirror. When you truly begin to focus on yourself, when you shut out the chaos and dare to be quiet, to confront your inadequacies, to aim up despite the burden, you become dangerous in the best possible way. You become someone who can carry weight, who can lead, who can serve. And the world doesn't need more noise. It needs more people like that. So be silent, be still, be watchful, and become. Because when you do that, when you truly focus inward with discipline and honesty, everything around you begins to align. Order emerges from the fog. Meaning blooms in the soil of suffering. And you discover, maybe for the first time, what it truly means to be alive. Now go. Fix yourself and watch what happens. We're living in times of profound confusion. There's a kind of psychological fog that's settled over society. We're drowning in data, but starved for wisdom. Every day we're assaulted by headlines and hashtags, by the relentless scroll of social media, by an endless parade of other people's problems, ideas, crises. and outrage. And we've been conditioned, encouraged, even to believe that our value comes from how much we participate in that noise. So, but I'm here to tell you that's a lie, a dangerous one. There is no shortage of people trying to fix the world without ever looking in the mirror. But you can't aim at the highest good out there until you've ordered the chaos in here, in your mind, your habits, your soul. Hey, when you allow yourself to be constantly pulled outward, when you become obsessed with the opinions, behaviors, and failures of others, you forget the most vital truth that you have enough work to do cleaning up your own life to keep you occupied for a decade. And when you begin that work, you'll realize just how daunting and meaningful it really is. I often tell my students, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And they look at me like I've just handed them a mop instead of a manifesto. But that's exactly what I've done. Because if your own life is in disarray, if your routines are chaotic, your responsibilities neglected, your words dishonest, then you're not in a position to remake the world. You're just adding to its disorder. I remember vividly when I first started taking that idea seriously. I was in my late 20s, intellectually curious, but spiritually adrift. I could speak about Nietzsche and Jung and Dostoevsky, but I couldn't get out of bed with purpose. I had ideas, but no structure, no responsibility, no discipline. And one day I realized I was blaming the world for my own lack of direction. That was a devastating insight. It was also the beginning of change. I started small. I cleaned my room. I paid attention to how I spoke. I kept promises, even trivial ones, and observed the effect it had on my psyche. I began to prioritize what I could control, my thoughts, my actions, my habits. And slowly I felt a kind of momentum build. It wasn't grand or glorious. It was quiet, internal, but it was real. Now, this is the core truth most people miss. When you focus on yourself, your development, your morality, your capacity, you're not turning away from the world. You're preparing to serve it, to strengthen it. The self isn't something to be ignored in the name of collective progress. It's the foundation of it. A society is only as strong as the individuals who compose it. And if you're fragmented, anxious, dishonest, weak, then your contribution, no matter how noble your intentions, are tainted by that dysfunction. People want meaning. They crave it. But meaning doesn't emerge from a life spent barking into the void. It emerges from responsibility, from aiming at something noble, something worthy of sacrifice, and making yourself strong enough to bear it. And that begins always with the self. You have a soul. You have a mind. You have a body. Tend to them. Don't ignore them while pretending to fight some ideological dragon. You're not ready for that yet. Start here with the tangible, with the real, with the painful but honest work of self-development, because the alternative is terrifying. To be swallowed by the chaos, to become a person who talks but never transforms. And if that happens, if you forfeit the internal battle, you will not escape suffering. You will simply have no armor when it comes. So look inward, ruthlessly, relentlessly, because there's more power in mastering yourself than in attempting to master the world without wisdom. There's something about silence that unsettles people. We live in a culture addicted to expression. Constant, ceaseless expression. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone wants to be heard, validated, celebrated. But what happens when you stop talking? What happens when you stop reacting, stop tweeting, stop inserting yourself into every conversation, every conflict, every moment? I'll tell you what happens. Something sacred begins to take form. The emergence of discipline, of restraint, of attention, sharpened like a blade. In that silence, you encounter yourself in a way that noise has always helped you avoid. So I don't mean the silence of avoidance, of cowardice, of hiding. That's not silence. That's fear wrapped in inaction. No, I'm speaking of conscious, voluntary silence. Silence that you choose. Silence that's backed by strength. The kind of silence that radiates power because it means you're listening to the world, yes, but more importantly to yourself, to what's happening inside you in ancient traditions. Christian, Buddhist, Stoic. Silence wasn't weakness. It was wisdom. The sages didn't speak constantly. They withdrew. They contemplated. They chose words with care because they understood something most people have forgotten. Speech is action. And if you're careless with your words, you're careless with your being. I've seen people destroy their lives because they didn't know how to shut up. Truly, they couldn't resist responding. They had to be right. They had to win. And in that compulsion to speak, they betrayed themselves because they revealed their chaos before they had understood it. When you remain silent, especially when provoked, you do something extraordinary. You refuse to be dominated by your impulses. You refuse to be reactive. That doesn't mean you're passive. It means you're choosing response over reaction. And there's a vast difference between the two. Let me tell you a story. Years ago, I had a patient, brilliant mind, but chronically anxious. He couldn't stop talking about politics, about injustice, about other people's failures. And I asked him, what would happen if you didn't say anything for a week? Unless it was absolutely necessary. He looked at me like I'd suggested he stop breathing, but he tried it. And what happened was fascinating. Oh, at first it was agony. He said he felt like he was going to disappear, like he had no identity without his words. But then something shifted. He started listening.